Hello book friends, welcome to Uncommon Reader. I'm Daniela. I'm truly happy to be with you today to talk about my beloved Jack London and my recent read with Renee of Beyond Books. We did this buddy read of The Iron Heel, and you will find Renee's video link on the description of this video. Please make sure you watch her review, which I know is going to be great. And before we start talking about The Iron Heel, I'm going to give you a few informations on how Jack London got initiated to socialism, as The Iron Heel feels more like an essay than a real kind of an adventurous book. And actually, I'm not surprised that Jack London decided to write this dystopian story, because by reading his biography, and more specifically the one by Irving Stone, he talked a bit about his approach to socialism. And as well, you know, if you read Martin Eden, the character in Martin Eden, which is semi-autobiographical, also approaches socialism. So it wasn't a complete departure for me, but it is quite an interesting book, although quite intense. But first, I'm going to give you some, I'm looking at my notes, some information, because Jack London's turn towards socialism wasn't abstract or purely intellectual. It came out of a very direct, often harsh personal experience, and it was reinforced by what he witnessed also in London's East End, and we'll talk a bit about that. So London grew up in poverty in California and worked grueling jobs from young age. He was a factory laborer, oyster pirating. He worked in a laundromat in Martin Eden as well, and later became a sailor. The turning point came during the economic depression of the 1890s. Like many others, he became unemployed and joined groups of itinerant workers, the so-called tramps, traveling across the U.S. During this period, he was arrested for vagrancy and spent time in jail. That experience, combined with witnessing extreme inequality, convinced him that poverty wasn't just individual failure, it was systematic. So around this time, he began reading socialist thinkers, particularly Karl Marx, and soon joined the Socialist Labor Party of America, and later was called the Socialist Party. And he would go on to write essays and give speeches advocating socialism, arguing that capitalism inevitably produced suffering for the working class. And in this case, I can add on that reading the biography, Irving Stone was stressing out how generous Jack London was when he would get money. He was sensitive to people that didn't have enough, and so he was lending money left and right. So he was such a generous person. So in 1902, he took this trip to East End, London, which is one of the poorest urban areas in the world at the time. I think he was sent by a newspaper he was collaborating with, and they actually didn't want him to live in the East End because they considered it very dangerous. But of course, Jack London didn't listen to them, and he rented a flat there. So he disguised himself as a destitute sailor and lived among the poor to observe conditions firsthand. What he saw shocked him. Overcrowded housing, chronic hunger, child labor, and people trapped in cycles of casual labor and homelessness. These experiences became the basis for his book, The People of the Abyss, which was published in 1903. And in that work, he didn't just describe misery, he framed it as evidence of systematic failure. He argued that industrial capitalism in a wealthy empire like Britain still produced mass deprivation, reinforcing his socialist beliefs. The East End trip deepened London's conviction that poverty was global and structural, not accidental. It also sharpened the tone of his political writing, more urgent, more moralistic, and often more radical. And you can see these ideas echo not only in The People of the Abyss, but also in the later work of The Iron Heel, where he imagines a future dominated by an oppressive capitalist oligarchy. And here we come to The Iron Heel, which he actually set only 3 years after he started writing this book. Very strange, and with Renee we were wondering why such a close future. But this is a dystopian novel with a political undertone that imagines the United States in a near future marked by intense social tensions. I would call it more than tensions, but the plot is told in the form of a rediscovered manuscript. The author of this historical manuscript is Avis, an intellectual upper-middle-class woman, initially distant from revolutionary ideas, until, through her dad, she meets Ernest, a charismatic, rational, and highly determined socialist leader, almost idealist in his way of thinking and speaking. So their relationship stems from a clash of ideas. Avis knows him as a political adversary, but she becomes progressively fascinated by him, first intellectually and then emotionally. Their dynamic is a mix of ideological conflict, intellectual attraction, and personal transformation. So Avis goes from privileged observer to active participant in the revolution. So Avis's manuscript, discovered 700 years later, imagine that, is a very detailed account of the rise of a powerful oligarchic movement, the so-called Iron Heel, which gradually takes control of the country and harshly represses the workers and socialist movements. And as the political situation worsens and the Iron Heel takes control, Ernest becomes an increasingly central figure in the revolutionary movement. The bond between Avis and Ernest also strengthens, and now they are husband and wife, forced to live in hiding. And much of the novel focuses on the fierce clashes between the oligarchy and the revolutionaries, and a growing concentration of economic power and the use of force to maintain the order. The situation is taken to the extreme. It is a dystopian book, but at the same time, never Jack London will shy away from very graphic details we've learned with White Fang and other books, that when violence speak, it can be very raw and very crude, and so sometimes reading certain pages can be quite disturbing. But at the same time, it's all too reminiscent of what radical regimes will do still to these days around the world, and that's no dystopia, unfortunately. So this book is really dense, but I think absolutely powerful in its concept, and I think London demonstrates again his great intelligence, foresight, and sensitivity. Also, I was fascinated by the fact that Jack London set up this novel as the manuscript that was found was a real thing, a real artifact. And there is a foreword in the novel giving information about the character of Ernest Everhart and how his figure was viewed after the manuscript was founded. There are also footnotes in many, many pages that support the dystopian scene, and it sort of gives additional details on characters in the book, and I assume those are false, and maybe some facts might be real. I'm not sure, because it was quite a lot of information. To me, really, this shows again the extent of London talent, just remarkable. So what did I think about the book? So with Renee, we were sort of discussing this fact that the author of the manuscript would be a woman. And to me, just keep showing how liberal Jack London was, and maybe adding a little bit of woman's touch, a little bit of romantic element to it would soften the very heaviness of all the debates, the political and socialist debates that are quite intense in the book. My favorite parts were, in fact, the beginning when the two meet, and there's not much romance, but the way Jack London describes these encounters and these first, I wouldn't call them quarrel, but just like these confrontations about what Avis was standing for before she knew Ernest were quite eye-opening to her, and I like the way she progressively got interested in Ernest's point of view, and she sort of formed her own opinion, not just because she was in love with him. She really thought this through. I also loved Avis' father, who was the one that, despite could have been part of the Iron Heel, he leaned morally more to Ernest's way of thinking, also risking his own career at one point. The parts where there were debates, discussions of the way oligarchy works were sometimes complicated for me. So maybe I read without understanding completely. And I also have to confess that I did find an audiobook on YouTube narrated in Italian, and that helped maybe speed up my comprehension and fasten up also finishing up the book. But I can never get enough of Jack London, so I'm really biased with this book. I also mentioned that I read The Scarlet Plague, but I think I'm going to speak about that book, which is another dystopian, quite interesting but a little shorter of a story, in another video. Overall, I can tell you that this is a breeze to read, but I think I'm biased. I will take anything Jack London gives me, because I really admire him as a person first and then as a writer. And maybe I was a little pressed because my trip to California was coming up, so I wanted to finish the book before leaving. And I also forgot to bring the book with me because I had selected a few parts I wanted to read, but maybe that's better. I actually ended up renting an ebook from my library here in San Jose, and I'm just going to leave you with a few words by Avis right after she meets Ernest. So it's not about politics. It's just a little something that I wanted to share. So this is Avis talking about Ernest. I need scarcely say that I was deeply interested in Ernest Everhart. It was not alone what he had said and how he had said it, but it was the man himself. I'd never met a man like him. I suppose I was shy in spite of my 24 years. I had not married. I liked him. I had to confess it to myself. And my life for him was founded on things beyond intellect and argument. Regardless of his bulging muscles and prize fighter's throat, he impressed me as an ingenious boy. I felt that under that guise of an intellectual swashbuckler was a delicate and sensitive spirit. I sensed this in ways I knew not, save that they were my woman's intuitions. There was something in that clarion call of his that went to my heart. It still rung in my ears, and I felt that I should like to hear it again, and to see again that glint of laughter in his eyes that belied the impassioned seriousness of his face. And there were further reaches of vague and indeterminate feelings that stirred in me. I almost loved him then, although I'm confident, had I never seen him again, that the vague feelings would have passed away and that I would easily have forgotten him. But I was not destined never to see him again. There you go. I hope you enjoyed this video, and again, I remind you to watch Renee's video as well. You'll find the link in the info box. I thank you so much for keeping me company today here on Uncommon Reader, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Happy reading. Ciao.